Welcome to DrJLT Economics. I am Dr. Julin Teng. In this episode, I want to talk about the money cannon of the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States. This is an issue that I think a lot of people, a lot of economists outside the United States have been really quite aware for the last 5 decades. Especially, I think actually perhaps a little bit longer, even before the Nixon shock. So ever since the Bretton Woods system, there has been this notion of exorbitant privilege. But it really took on a new form after the Nixon shock, whereby the US dollar was decoupled from its underlying asset, which was gold. And more importantly, in 2008, when under the presidency of Barack Obama, the Fed chair, basically the Federal Reserve, started what is known as quantitative easing, which is just a fancy term for money printing. And it was suggested that it was a new way of managing finances, that some people refer to it as an implementation of the so-called modern monetary theory. But in reality, this thing is 1,000 years old. We can see the Roman Empire fell because of modern monetary theory. The Han Dynasty collapsed because partly of quantitative easing, and the same can be said for a lot of historical empires. And I think this is something that is really entering perhaps the beginning of the end. But let's just take one step back. Let's not talk so much about the predictions, but what exactly does this money cannon mean? Why is it so insidious? I think it is really a very insidious weapon, and that is why I think it is not just a money printer, but it really is a money cannon. I think there are three, perhaps three issues that we need to talk about. The first one, issue A, is that you see a lot of talks from the United States, American economists included, but more importantly politicians, complaining the trade deficit. Of course, ever since the Nixon shock, the United States has always had a tremendous trade deficits. In the beginning, it was with the Europeans, and then with the Japanese, and currently with the Chinese, but also all the way from those energy exporting nations, or with those energy exporting nations. And the reason is actually very simple. The United States does not have a trade deficit because the United States has been continually exporting its US dollar. That is something that is how to say, a lot of times being just misunderstood, because if you have something of value that you have worked to create, for example, if you have accumulated a foreign exchange, for example, let's say Germany has accumulated some foreign exchange of Japanese yen, and if Germany goes to buy some products from Japan, and it uses the Japanese yen, then it's actually making a purchase using basically the Japanese yen that it had earned by producing goods or services that it had sold to Japan before. But the United States is very different. The United States printed the money and gave it and just started spending. And that it's very different scenario. And that is why the United States had always had trade deficits. It needed to always export US dollar because it creates US dollar. No other place is allowed to create US dollar. So this is the first thing that we need to understand. And the second thing, issue B, factor B, is that money printing in all nations, whatever, even outside in the United States, money printing causes inflation, and it's a form of taxation on the savings and primarily on the savings of people holding their currency. And the unique case of the United States is that when the Federal Reserve creates money out of thin air, it is different in that it's monetary. It's the United States dollar is the world's reserve currency. All the assets in the world is denominated in the USD, and all the wealth of the rest of the world are in the current system also tightly knit to the US dollar. So in a way, that the Fed is creating money out of thin air through quantitative easing is taxing not only the US citizens, but also a tax on the entire globe. And this is something that even the conservative economists from the United States, they don't want to talk about this. They talk about creating all this money is a tax on the U.S. On tax on the U.S. Citizens, but they don't talk about the fact that this also is a tax on everyone who has savings across the world, and it creates inflationary pressure across the world. I think everyone who has some basic understanding of economics knows this, but not everyone is willing to talk about it because a lot of people who know this have vested interests in sustaining this system. So this also is why when the Federal Reserve Chair just came out the other day and said that we don't have a lot of inflation, we want to create more inflation, and etc. So the idea is that, well, our economy is not very good, so let's create more money and see if we can tax the world and see what we can bring to the United States economy. That's a way of looking at it. I think perhaps this is more blunt way of putting it, but in a way it is correct, right? And thirdly, the third issue that I want to talk about that is also very important is that the Fed's money cannon is also a form of what I would call neocolonialism. So instead of going into a colony, right, and setting up all the plantations and enslave the locals, or perhaps import some slaves from another continent, what you do now is force them to sell you their natural resources and their goods and services in your currency that you can create without cost. And that is basically a much smarter way of colonizing, of imperialism, right? And it is a way of getting resources in exchange of practically air, and in the meantime, it is all under the guise of free trade. That's something also we need to be aware of, because normally in economics, when we think about money, we think about value that is created. So if we do a certain amount of work with certain amount of technology and perhaps a certain amount of market conditions, we create certain amount of value. And this value, we want to measure it in some sort of currency. But let's not confuse that with money that is being printed out of thin air. And in fact, they don't even need a printing press. It is just a bunch of numbers from a computer. Perhaps by the stroke of a keyboard, of a key, someone can create trillions of dollars. Indeed, they have just done that in the last week, and we have seen some reactions in asset market, and we will continue to see reactions in asset markets, because that goes to another issue of money printing, which is domestic. But in this video, I want to talk about really money printing, the effect of money printing on the international scale, and that is what it is, right? So when you print money, you don't create value. You simply dilute the value that is denominated in this currency. And when you can create currency uniquely, you can, no one else can, you are basically saying that I am here to print this money and take your resources, take your work, tax your people, tax your wealth, and I will export to you this thing. And I will complain at home about trade deficit. That's basically what it is. Now, is there a way to avoid this being basically subjugated to this system? And the answer, I think, most likely is that it is very difficult. It is very difficult. I think there were some small countries in the Middle East and North Africa, who, and I think also in Latin America, who have tried, and they have been, they have been forcibly, stopped these programs. These programs had to stop, right? So it is very difficult for a single nation to really conceive a way out of this system, and this is why this system is so insidious. But is it possible that this system will eventually collapse? And I think the answer is absolutely yes, because every single empire in the history of the humankind who has exercised the modern monetary theory has collapsed and had seen their currency go into hyperinflation, had seen their military power, their cultural influence, and their technological and economic leads recede. So I think this is going to happen. Now, in what time frame, I think is something that is very difficult to say, but perhaps I would say in the coming decade. And I say this because the United States has absolutely dominance in military, while the United States has absolutely the absolute dominance in culture and in mostly also in international trade, although this position is being weakened. I think the problem really comes down to their own undoing. That the Federal Reserve, due to domestic and to really a much lesser extent international pressures and situations, conditions that have put the US economy into such a state where money printing can only be accelerated. It's very difficult to slow it down. It's like a runaway train. And because of the debt of the federal government of the United States, and because of the decade-long zero or negative interest rates across the board, the economy is basically addicted to basically money printing, the US economy. And they cannot slow down. And in order to continue to grow and to continue the high, it is necessary for them to continue to print. And sorry. And as they continue to print, there will be, I think, a final reckoning, and perhaps a collection of other powers, economic powers, will arrange, and I think they are perhaps already attempting and perhaps already to some degree succeeding in making arrangement to circumvent the dollar-denominated system. And when this switch becomes the norm, the reserve currency status of the US dollar will be gone. And when that is gone, I think actually we will see a better world, because there will be less funding for war. There will be more balance of power, because we will see a more multipolar world where the United States will still remain a very big player, just like after the collapse of the Roman Empire. I think we will see the rise of the Byzantine Empire, and I think that's perhaps to come. But in its current form, where the Federal Reserve just prints money, the United States exports US dollar in exchange for real goods and services, that they tax the wealth of the whole world, and that is able to collect the natural resources as well as goods and services of all the nations in the world, basically for nothing. The age is over, I think, in a decade. So, well, if you have made it so far, thank you very much. I hope you have enjoyed this recording, and I'd encourage you to subscribe to this channel. And also, I will, I think, in the next episode, talk about money printing and perhaps the domestic impact for the United States. And I think that will be actually applicable to a lot of foreign, for most economies, let's put it that way. And if you can find more of my thoughts on DrJLT.com, and also you can find my business, Neophiliac.com, which is NEOFILIAC.com. Thank you very much for listening. Have a great day.